Musings of a Modern Conservative. Short Essays on Various Political Topics by Thomas Hamilton. Section 2. Musings on Economics. Essay 9. Money. As I often listen to the complaints of the world, I am usually puzzled to hear this word, free. Such a word does not truly exist, and nothing is free, and when I hear this often peculiar word, two questions come to mind. Free for who, and who else is being made to pay for it? When thinking of money and wealth, it often comes to this simple idea. Tomorrow, we could feed all of the world, but who would pay for it? This is the easiest way I can describe the nature of money. Isn't it this concept, namely, that not everyone can have everything, that the view of evil money comes from? On the other hand, isn't money just a way of holding the place of one's labor? Without money, how does one directly value their labor in a larger economic sense? Though, is there some innate evil associated with it? And should it be removed from one individual in favor of another? Is the pursuit of money inherently evil, or is it simply examining the value of one's labor and then asking the question, what should its reward be? I know this concept is not new or markedly unique, but I would like to throw my hat into the mix and add my views to the concepts and workings of money. I would like to first muse on whether or not there can be another way other than money. I, as of this time, can see no other way to value the labor of an individual. So, how does money place value on the labor of an individual? Well, if one works, either for themselves or for another, they will in almost all circumstances earn a wage. This wage then has to be comprised of some means of transferring that labor into items that the individual needs and wants. How then best to create a system where that wage has the most ability? In other words, how does a society best value one's labor? It could be said that barter may be a better system, and thusly what one labors for could be individually compared against. In this instance, wouldn't one go about trading their skills, much like one does with their friends and neighbors, and say, you fix a section of my roof and I'll wire your stereo, or mow my lawn and I'll fix your computer, and so on. In this case, no money passes from one hand to another, right? The answer is no. Money does pass from one hand to the other, but not in the way most individuals view it. Let's say that it takes 3 hours to wire a stereo, and 2 to fix the roof of a house. Would this be a fair trade then? Upon initial observation, the answer would be no. But what if supply and demand were brought into the equation? It would seem that in this case, roofing, relative to stereo wiring, has a higher demand. Thus, wouldn't it then be fair? The question is, how does this translate if one needs their roof done, but the other individual doesn't need their stereo wired? To pose the question in a more general term, how does one gain a good or service if the good or service that they are providing is not directly needed? Couldn't we create a system in which the value of labor is general to the economy, but specific to the individual? Then this system would need to have the same value to all individuals. Wouldn't this system need to associate the value of the labor with some form of medium? What would this keepsake and means of valuing labor be then, if not money? Money, in my view, is simply a euphemism for valued labor. Barter comes into other odd difficulties, such as how does one divide the labor of one into something smaller than the worth of the whole? For example, how does one compare a car for work done on one's roof? How many hours of roofing would need to be done to earn the direct barter value of that car? How much plumbing would need to be done in exchange for an individual's taxes to be done by the local accountant? What about other goods, such as oranges, apples, and other such meats and vegetables? Wouldn't everything have to be bundled up together? What if the value of the labor is worth more than the quantity desired? How is the labor divided? Would one then receive a future ability to receive goods, but without anything in exchange? If this saved barter value is added on, isn't the labor then being in some manner quantified? If that labor is quantified, then wouldn't that quantification just as easily be money? So then, what is it about money that keeps being brought about as an evil entity? Well, if one gains money unduly from theft, coercion, or by other nefarious means, wouldn't it be as though it was stealing more than simple wealth? couldn't it also be concluded that if money is as labor, then the gaining of money through theft would be as though the labor of an individual was stolen? Then, if labor is stolen from an individual, wouldn't there be also the theft of that individual's time? More wealth can be created, but the time it took to gain the previous wealth can never be regained. Isn't this where the moral ambiguity comes into view, at the point where one views the concept of unduly? What constitutes undue wealth gaining? And even more confusing is, when does one's labor take from another? In the larger economic sense, doesn't it seem that the wealth of another, in the competitive economic environment, generally lead to the removal of wealth of another? So how does this equate to undue wealth, as it were? I come to the conclusion in the form of a question: did I steal? In other words, did I take someone's labor without compensating them, reasonably, for the good or service that they provided? The difficulty in answering this question seems to me to come from the liberal. The liberal will often revert to arguments of fairness. If you earn substantially more than someone else, aren't you in some way stealing from another? Could that wealth be better used for others? Don't others work just as hard as you? If so, aren't they compensated as you are? What if the owner of a company removes some of their workforce? Isn't that person stealing the wealth of those workers in favor of themselves? I answer it as a conservative, easily, by asking myself, did I earn it? Instead, the question that the liberal asks is, would you like to be compensated in that manner? This is, in my view, a grand fallacy within the question, though. First, it assumes equal measure of labor. But why isn't all labor equal? Don't we all lose time when we labor? Isn't that lost time needed to be compensated for equally? Again, I refer to my opening question. We could feed the world tomorrow, but who would pay for it? All labor is equal, but it is not equally compensated. The question at hand seems to be then, why isn't all labor equally compensated? This brings back notions of supply and demand. If everyone wants something, then the labor is worth more, as more people want it. But if they don't want it, then the labor is worthless. What is the value of labor if no one wants it? Does labor have an intrinsic value? Should there be an intrinsic value to labor? I say yes, but that value does not have to have value to everyone. If you spend your time cultivating roses so that you can give your husband or wife a romantic surprise, does all that work need to have a check accompanied with it? Your husband or wife will undoubtedly reward you through affection, but that labor has no value to anyone else, and can only be compensated by your husband or wife. If this example holds true, then isn't it also true that while all labor has value and is compensated for, not all labor is equally compensated, and therefore, not all money is equal?